How has podcasting changed your life? Right here, right now, PodMax Live.
You are now tuned in to the On Air Brands podcast.
Welcome back to the show.
We made it. You guys.
Erik, I don't know if you misspoke, but you said PodMax Live. What did I hear there?
So nice of you to notice.
I do nothing but.
And I love going meta and telling everybody what we're doing because they're watching this right now on the On Air Brands Live Facebook and all of our channels on YouTube. But Josh and I are doing a soft launch of a new show called the PodMax Podcast or PodMax Live, which could be found on Facebook at PodMax Live, just like our On Air Brands page. But yeah, we are launching a new show that's really going to be talking about how podcasting changed your life. And Josh and I have many stories that can continue on and on through these episodes. And everybody that we bring on is going to share how things blew up or changed their lives in involving podcasting. So,
and just to be clear about it, this is not host specific. Let me repeat, this is not host specific. Because as the good guests out there know, that's most of the stories too, isn't it? How podcasting has changed and helped your life and business grow and evolve from the guest perspective. So all throughout these episodes, Erik and I do our fair share of guesting as well as hosting, of course. So we're going to have all these stories. We're going to bring in people from both sides of the mic that can help you in this new kind of newfangled world. And to help us get started, who better than right there? Who better than right? Am I right? Am I lying, Erik?
not lying. Let's do it, man. The Bizz Bros are with us.
Hey, what's up, guys? Thank you so much.
Now,
Thank you. We appreciate the sounds effect. That was great. That was amazing.
Yeah, I know you have it there on your board there. Darth Vader's chest plate is what I like to call that.
Is that it? Okay.
I love it.
And more specifically, we are talking about the brothers, Luis and Luis, really, who also goes by Fonzi. It's on you to figure out on the screen who is Luis and who is
You
Luis.
can't go wrong. I'll tell you that.
No.
You'll 100% be right.
That's right.
They can let us know in the comments, like, who has a sexy voice, and then we'll
That's the advantage, you say Luis and we both turn around. We're like, yeah, you with one name, you can call both of us.
Easy.
So who's the older brother here?
Definitely me. Yes. If you cannot tell by the way that we've communicated in the last few months, definitely me.
How much older are you, Luis?
We're about 3.5 years apart. So growing up, that was definitely like we were not close at all.
I mean, whoa.
Oh, man. News to Luis, aka Fonzi.
Wow, I'm just realizing this, guys, today. This is breaking news, I thought we were close our whole life. I think he meant we didn't used to hang out with the same group of people until I turned 16, right? 15, 16. Around that age, we started hanging out a little bit more.
If that's what you want to think, yeah. Okay.
That's the story you can tell yourself, Fonzi.
Absolutely.
I will.
The question that we always ask ourselves, and we never have the balls to ask you guys in person, what is like the story behind that? Why did your parents name you both the same name?
Yeah, that's a great story. I think my brother tells it better, so I'm gonna throw him under the bus.
The pressure's on. Really, our mom was a secret marketer, so she knew that we were gonna be famous. And it happens to be a great hook every time we go to events and meet new people. But the lie that they tell us is that so my dad was married with his first wife, and everybody on that side of the family is Mario. Like my dad is Mario. My older brother is Mario. His kid is Mario. Our sister is Marionette, which is a French name, pronounced Marion. But everything Mario, right?
Our grandfather is Mario.
Our grandfather
too.
is Mario. So when my mom came along, and for the second round, she was like, absolutely no Marios. We're going to start the Luis's trend. So, we're originally from Venezuela. So back home, two names make your full name. So that's how they call us, right? So my full name is Luis Daniel. Fonzi here is Luis Alfonso. But here, when we came to the States about 10 years ago, people tend to be very confused by the two names. So I was like, hey, just call me Luis. And then Fonzi came to Jacksonville a few years later, and we started calling him Fonzi.
Yeah, I will add this. Being the younger brother with the same name, it's a big advantage, especially right when you go into college for the first time. I'm not going to say why, but it was a very big advantage having the same name as my brother. I throw that
out.
And now you guys are known as the Bizz Bros, obviously here. What was it like to start that decision to say, you know what? There is a business here together. Let's venture into business.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the main thought was like there's going to be a business here, and that's then we chose the name. So funny how that happened. About 5 years ago, I was recently graduated from college. Fonzi was still in there. We always had that itch of doing something, different, like not going to corporate, just trying to figure out this business game and looking for new opportunities, right? Like our dream is to bring our family, be here with us, or making sure that if they're back home, they're well taken care of because they did that with us as we grew up playing soccer and trying to achieve that dream. So then we're like, okay, what is this business game? Like, what can we start doing? And that's how everything started. In our first venture was actually vinyl stickers. So completely very different to what we do now. We went through screen printing T-shirts and all these like different ideas. So when it was time to like name the company and like register, we're trying to find this name. And we're like, well, we're brothers and we do business.
Yeah.
So let's just call it Bizz Bros. So that's how it started. And now this is everything that we do. And it's been fun. And there's some plans in the future that it's going to be fun.
Yeah. Hopefully the Bizz Bros are on for the long run. I hope my brother doesn't revert to his earlier years where he says that we're not close anymore, but we'll see what happens.
So cool. I wanted to start it off by sharing a quick story about how podcasting changed someone's life, not necessarily mine, but plenty of those stories as Josh and you guys as well. But the event that we hold, which you guys are, we're honored to have you guys to be a part of it. We're super proud, especially when you guys are in the room. You bring a level of energy and gravitas, to the whole event.
Good word.
We thank you always for that. But someone came through our event. I think you guys were there. It was a joint venture that we had with Propelify, and he was a client and came through. And in between, you guys know how. So for anyone who hasn't been part of PodMax, we give our guests 3 interviews on a podcast, and Bizz Bros may or could be one of those if you join us on December 4th. So what happens is, if you're lucky, and what happened was in between, we have an opportunity to banter, network, get to know one another. Josh does a fantastic job of like giving everyone the mic and the spotlight to tell their story during these times in between. And Josh stepped away, so I took the mic and the MC role, and I was asking someone in the audience about his story. So it was basically a non-traditional podcast because it was in between, and there was an audience.
It was casual.
It was casual. It was probably 24 people listening to the conversation because it was lunchtime. And we found out recently, and this must happen all the time, where people don't always share these stories. So if you're listening and you're watching and you have a story to share, please let us know. Hit us up in the comments or email us at podmax@onairbrands.com. But he told us that there was a guy in the audience listening that reached out afterwards and said, hey, I am that person that you're looking for. You mentioned a certain thing, specifically in this case, it was gamification. And gamification has very specific players, developers, and types of characteristics. And the guy that reached out that was listening to the story was that person. He fit the role that this guy was looking for that I was interviewing. They're working together now. They're partnering. They're building business together. How crazy is that? That not a traditional podcast, but a podcast event connected someone to the degree where now is like, well, we found an answer for him live during a show, during an event. I just wanted to share that with everybody because that blew our minds when he told us that story.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I actually remember there was another person in your event that he was like, I found out that the person that I was talking to, he actually lives in my same town, and now they go play golf together. And I think they're trying to start their own business as well together. They like partner up, and I was like, this is amazing the way you guys are bringing people together.
What I love about this industry that I often preach is that it allows you to be as creative as you can imagine. There's very little rules to what's possible within a podcast format. So I want to hear from you guys outside of the show that you guys do, because you have your own show, of course, but you've also created your business around the industry. So connect all those dots for us, how you use the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you want me to throw you under the bus on this one?
We'll just interrupt each other like we always do. But it's been incredible, first of all, right? Like it took us, and I want to preface this a little bit, but it took us 3 years to actually start creating content, right? We knew we had to create content. We knew we had to publish, yet we were very afraid to do so because we, fear of judgment, just putting yourself in front of the camera. And I mean, all the people that we looked up to, they were saying, you have to publish. If you want to grow your business, you have to create content, right? And we dabble here and there, we tried, but never actually did taking action by putting yourself in front of the camera and being those people that share the message.
Yeah, I think a big part too was confusion. There's a lot of stuff out there telling you how to do it, right? And it's like different things, different tactics, all these calendars. And believe me, we tried every single one of them. And for us, it was more of a friction point. Like we just encountered like all these friction walls, and we're like, man, like we're gonna stop execution because like this doesn't, like we cannot execute on this on time, or creating excuses or a ton of stuff, right? It just added a ton of lists of things to do so we could publish. And that was a big element for us. And that was something that stopped us from start creating content consistently.
Yeah, absolutely. So at first we were, how can we remove all this friction and just get used to publish, to be there consistently? And we decided to do what we now call the minimum viable content, which is, for us, was a Facebook Live. We have 10 minutes a day, right? After checking our phone and seeing how much time we were spending on our phone, we're like, we can definitely spare like 10 minutes of social media, swiping, and go straight into creating some content.
Yeah.
And that allowed us to gain a little confidence. And then when we transitioned into podcasting, right, a bigger platform, if you want to put it that way, and we started developing these relationships, that's when everything changed, right? We started creating, we started contacting people that we had no idea. We honestly never thought they would say yes to our proposal to come and talk to us, right? To build that relationship. And once we had them in the podcast, we started building this trust, this rapport with them, sharing stories back and forth. And then after the podcast was done, we would even talk more with them. And now we're still in contact with them. And that just opens up so many opportunities for both sides, because you can help them in a certain way, and they can also help you in a certain way. You never know who you're going to come across. Yeah. So relationships has been, if not the most important one of the key points right there of actually having a podcast.
You highlighted something to me that I don't think we've ever spoken about, Josh, is the fact that a podcast can be used not just as content creation and service to others by giving them a voice and a stage and a platform, but then also a wonderful way to show that person on the other side of the mic who could potentially become a client who you really are, your personality, what you're about, through a deeper conversation and a long form conversation, as opposed to a client call where you're putting on your best face and you're maybe pretending to be something that, or you're just showing a certain light so you don't want them to, reject you. It's a different sort of approach to that conversation, because now it's a podcast and you're just being yourselves and you're helping them. And now they, in turn, they feel like, man, I really owe these guys something. Thank you so much. How about I just become a client? Yeah. How powerful is that?
I love that, Erik. You just said, kind of like in comparison to a client call and putting on your best face, I think something that podcasting actually gave to us was that confidence of being ourselves, right?
Mm.
And we always refer back to this story when we first started selling our social media marketing agency service, right? This was again like 3 years ago. I would go to restaurants dressed up in a suit. Like, that is not me. Like, first of all, like, if you're watching this video
He
right
didn't
now,
even wear a suit at my wedding, so
Oh.
I did. It might have come off pretty quick, but hey. But if you're seeing this video, I have 7 of these shirts, different colors. That is literally everything I wear, right? And but again, like, that lesson, that relationship with that business, with that restaurant, so much friction in there. It didn't go well because I wasn't myself. I didn't sell him into the product as myself, so expectations were set in a wrong way, right? But now with the podcast, part of what we have building is, not building, part of what we have been discovering is our own personality and our own confidence to show in a real self, right? So now when we have these client calls as well, we are our real self, and it's awesome because we get to connect with people in an authentic way, and now they don't have expectations, right? They're not like, oh, okay, we're gonna go into this business venture with this suited guy. No, they're like, we're gonna go into this venture with the Bizz Bros, right? Exactly how they are, which it has been a game changer.
That was an interesting journey because it certainly did not start that way. Like the reason we started the podcast, we tried about a year ago to start this thing, and we had this like crazy set at Fonzi's room because we didn't have the office back then, and we had this light, 2 cameras, and it looked like a very weird, different type of content that we're about to film. So Fonzi's girlfriend will come in and just like, what's going on, guys? And we're like, we're just recording a podcast. It's like, don't think of like something different. But then we recorded 5 episodes, but the fact was like there was a lot of friction there with the 2 cameras. Then we had to edit afterwards, and it was just a ton of work, right? It's how we thought it was supposed to be done. Now those 5 episodes are still in the vault. Like, we haven't like touched them since. And then a year later, a year and a little bit later, our main client like decides, not decides, this whole craziness starts to happen. They close and they're like, I cannot pay you anymore. And we're like, man, like, okay, this is the time after Fonzi, changed perspective on me after my major freak out. Is like, this is the time to start the show. This is the time to do this. And let's apply the minimum viable concept of less friction as possible and do this thing. And the main goal was to create that platform for us really to just start sharing stories. So the first 20 episodes, it was just Fonzi and me getting very comfortable with the idea of sharing content, like sharing stories, following like our own framework, executing consistently 3 times a week. That was the goal. Right after the 20 episodes, we start having these conversations with wonderful people, Pablo included. And Pablo was like the first official guest of Content's Profit.
Wow.
Who, by the way, hasn't received a legit intro, so he's coming back. But he's another one that says like podcasting is like networking on steroids, right? And that's when we started to understand that amazing value point. And we're like, man, from now on, everything is going to be, interviews, except something major happens. So we started connecting with entrepreneurs, sharing our messages, seeing if we actually sync as potential business partners, right? As potential relationships, because sometimes we might have this idea, but then the ball is like so far away, from the goal that we might be a resource for later. So when people ask us like, what's the return on investment? Well, infinite can be, because on the back end, like those relationships, you never know. And for us, it really changed our business because first it saved it. We have about 2 months of runway when this episode happened. Within 2 weeks, we've recovered those sales, and within a month, we triple sales. And then we went from a 2-man operation to now a team of almost 10 people within 7 months. And it has been like incredible because of that. And, we understand now we work with our dream client. We have amazing relationships. We've connected with beautiful, like amazing businesses. Like if we cannot fulfill, we connect them with somebody that can. And then, wow, it just goes around and it's like karma on steroids.
Did I hear this part correctly? Your business right now is creating content and pieces of micro content based on podcast episodes. Did I hear you correct that you had that in place before you had a show of your own?
Yes. So that was actually, again, our story. It went from stickers to that, so you can imagine the whole transition point in there. Yeah. But yes, it got to a point where we were decided to go with content and start repurposing content. But the issue was too, we were not doing it ourselves. Right.
There you go. That's what I was picking up on. So to
Mhm.
hear that, no, you actually did it, and then reverse the order, because I always say that I've been doing my personal show, the Hidden Entrepreneur Show, for 2.5 years now, 180 episodes plus, and still going. And out of the gate, I didn't know really where it was going to lead. I had some ideas and milestones and points that I wanted to reach, and in order to say, and one of those was, I want to be a player. I want to be part of the podcast world. Okay, Josh, you better start recording a show. So I reversed it that way to know that the show, regardless of where and how I was going to get somewhere in the industry, I knew that had to be the base first.
Yeah, I mean, we had a very specific episode that's when like we really understood that we were selling this service. Like we had somewhat of a method, like that we will go to businesses and we'll record the show. We actually go on location and record like these pieces of content, right?
We used to,
yeah. not anymore. It might come later at some point, but who knows? Super high ticket. Teasing it. If you're interested, let us know. Anyways, we will come into this business, right? And we're pitching the idea, right? And we had some client testimonials and samples and the results that we were getting. But this guy was like, "Where's you guys? Like, where's your content? Like, I cannot believe you. Like, I cannot trust you if you guys don't show me what you guys are doing." And
no proof.
There's no proof. And he was right. And it was like a massive gut punch. And we're like, man, that's when we came into the office and we're like, we need to start publishing. And that was when we started the minimum viable content, the 45 live, going live for 45 days to start building that base, right? And after that, when we decided to go on the show, we took it as an opportunity not only to express ourselves, to share our ideas, to deliver the message, but also as an opportunity to improve our M2M system, which is how we create content, not only for us, but for our clients too. And that process, we were able to speed up the systems, the processes to then execute not only for us, for that. So now the perspective on our content is like, hey, let's put it out there. Let's see what happens, right? Let's put it out there. Let's test new things. Let's test new frameworks. So now it became like this amazing experiment that while we produce the content, while we build relationships, now all these systems are optimized on the back end as well for the business itself. So it's been life-changing. Yeah.
I wanted to highlight something that's being told here for anyone who's been tuning in and out. What I'm gathering, which is really cool, is there's no exact formula that you need to follow in order for this to work for you. So from my story, very similar to Josh, I launched a podcast without really knowing what was going to become. I just knew I needed to do it. And I wasn't creating content per se at the level you guys were. It was a podcast. And I was promoting the podcast through whatever I could, audiograms or social posts. So I got to the point where people started to recognize what I was doing and then just wanted it for themselves, asking questions and advice, and then becoming a client. I was like, if I could do this for myself, I've developed systems and teams and processes where now I could duplicate it. Let's try it for you. So it's sort of the flip, where the podcast came first, but it doesn't, you're proof in the pudding that it doesn't have to be podcast or a show first. You can have content first and then flip it. So it's pretty cool to get to that realization.
Yeah. And I love what you're saying, right? Like there's no specific script, no specific how-tos for certain people. And the story we referred to is before we started the podcast, right? We were at this live event and they were talking about the attractive character, right? There were, everybody knows every business must have their attractive character. And we raised
Is that Lewis or Lewis?
Exactly.
That's you're about to find out. You're about to find out.
We raised our hands and we told them like, hey, in our business, there's two of us, right? What would you recommend? Like, can it be the two of us or do we have to pick one?
Oh, wow.
And they answered, you have to pick one, right? And for us, I was like, okay, like who are we gonna? We're like, the obvious choice was me, but it's okay. We all know we were like, okay, let's share a little bit.
It's fine.
But the thing is, after that, we were like, let's both do it. Like we just started doing the podcast. We were both here, and that has created a whole movement. We have a friend now that he's like, pick a bro, you gotta start a campaign that says pick a bro. So now we start asking our guests that, making them a little
pick a bro.
But it's kind of funny too.
Yeah.
And then we got to the realization like, wow, most people preach it this way. One, attractive character, yet for us, two, has worked. So that means it doesn't like what works for someone might not necessarily work for you.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's about taking action and then revising your results and say, is this working? Yes or no? Yes, I'm going to keep doing more of this. No? Okay, then let me pivot a little bit and see what I can find out.
Here's the application for the person tuning in right now that we each hit on, especially when you guys spoke about that client saying, hey, where is your show? And you're like, okay, I get it. We should probably do this. We've all had our version of that. So for the person tuning in, it doesn't matter if you're a coach, a consultant, a seller of widgets, what have you. Anything could be applied to a successful podcast to up that game. If you're a coach, just start talking about the stuff you know. If you sell widgets, great. Every episode is about that, or the people who use it, or it could just be you for literally 10 minutes talking about a new way or application to use it, or something cool about the industry. There are very little rules and so many upside wins that this medium can afford you.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Louis.
One thing that kind of like motivated us to, we see nowadays like people with a ton of like these crazy setups, right? Like you see ours now. Well, it didn't start this way. Like, and the funny story about the setup is like we made the investment because we thought the investment was gonna make us do the episode. So we recorded 5, and then that's it. For a full year, this equipment sat in the closet. Now we have our dad, which is almost 70 years old, recording his podcast episodes on his phone because he lives in Venezuela and has no access to equipment like this, right? But he's so passionate about what he does, about the stories that he writes, and he can do that. So the level of entry, just as like, let's start creating, it's very low. And then from there, you can develop your own frameworks and continue to evolve it, right? So for us, was the 45 Live, right? We just recorded on the phone. Right now, we're lucky that we have an advantage with the equipment, but the equipment has a purpose. The equipment has like, we don't want to do any post-production. So this equipment allows us to do that. We made that investment with that in mind. So it saved us a ton of time. But at the same time, we have people that record their shows on their Apple Watches, right? Like they go in and they talk to the Apple Watch and then they publish that, right? And then is the act of consistently creating content. So I would encourage everybody to kind of find that minimum viable show, minimum viable type of content so they can execute consistently. Is it once a week? Perfect. Execute that for 3 months and then reassess, right? Is it 2 a week? Great. Execute and reassess again, right? Is it with a partner? Is it a mix? Like establish your consistency, right? And then start executing. And it doesn't have to be very fancy. If you have the equipment, great. But don't let that stop you from creating content, because is the message what matters, right? Is your own message what matters to your audience?
You brought up something really powerful, and I think a lot of those out there who may want a podcast, and there's a lot of hurdles, we all know, right? But there's a solution for it that many of us have exercised and have implemented is finding a partner. So just like so I'm a real estate investor, and that was one of the things that was always plumped into our heads. It was like, if you don't have the bandwidth, you don't have the time, find someone who has the time. If you have the capital and you don't have the time, then find someone else, or vice versa. So find a partner. You can't do it alone. That's the same here, because people have to understand and realize eventually your podcast will become a business if you do it right. So find someone. If you don't have the time, find someone who has the time, or in our cases, who has the talent. So what Pablo, our good friend that we mentioned here, and myself, we've partnered with others so that we have other shows. Josh is my partner in this show. I have other partners for other shows. Why? Because technically they're clients. Technically they're people that needed a co-host to bounce off of, to help create, hold them accountable. So if you need someone, you want a podcast, you can look no further. You're looking at people who can do this for you, point you in the right direction, make the introductions, become your service provider in terms of, hey, I need a host. Who do I talk to? I need somebody to help me, shepherd me through this whole process, right? Yeah. There are people out there. You just have to you have to realize this is a solution, and it's an option for you.
That's why I am convinced that what you guys built with PodMax is so powerful, right? Like it's that platform. right? That allows people to go in there, explore this world, right? From the host perspective or from the guest perspective, and then they can see what's possible, right? Like, we have a story, like it was one of the latest episodes, I think, like in the upper 90s, that our guest canceled last minute, that we had to reschedule. And I was like, man, like, it's okay, like, let's take a break, right? And the commitment for us was 3 times a week, right? So in my head, I'm like, let's take a break. And Fonzi's like, dude, are you sure? Like, should we do it? I'm like, no, like we've already published all this stuff. Like, and again, like we're failing to our commitment. That was a moment of weakness of me, right? And then Fonzi, what he did was like, he didn't say anything. He just stood up, right? And then he started doing the setup. He goes outside and then he comes back and then he's plugging in the computer and he knows that I'm a little OCD, right? So I'm like, you're not doing it right. So let me get up. So I got up of my desk and started plugging it in. I'm like, let me just like plug it in my computer. And then all of a sudden we're doing the show, right? So is that point that you just made is like that accountability partner, right? If it's so hard, if doing it on your own adds friction, it's like, how can you remove the friction? It's all about the structure, the framework. Well, for us is us holding each other accountable. We work in the same space. For us, the podcast is a way to re-energize ourselves too. That's why we've done it at like at 4 p.m. Eastern. Now we're trying a new time, like at 2 p.m. Eastern, just because of operationally, like it works better for us, right? Like, can we level up? What's the framework after the show? What do we have to do after the show? So it's all those things. And then if you set yourself for success, like us trying to do it together, so whenever I fail, Fonzi can catch me, and whenever he fails, I can catch him, even better. So the percentage of failing just dramatically decreases. Not that failing is a bad thing, like we call it samples, but at the end of the day, we want to execute, right? So what's stopping you from executing? Identify and then create a system so you can beat that.
Do you also find that it's vitally important for the person who wants to get into the industry? And again, I just want to reiterate, there is so much creativity that is acceptable behind the mic. You can really make your show into anything you envision. But with that, do you find that knowing the why or the purpose or the outcome is so important? Because I think the trap we all understand is thinking, oh, I'm going to start this and then I'll just get it to Joe Rogan's level and I'll make 7-8 figures a year and what a life. But we know that that's nearly impossible. So that's a little derailed expectation there. So is there somewhat of a more realistic expectation for the result and purpose of your show that should be somewhat clear day one?
That's a super interesting question. Honestly, I don't know if we have asked that to ourselves yet, but I'm going to explain the transition of our show, right? I think that might bring some answers to the question. First, I believe personally that setting a goal like that crazy is the fastest way to, kill your own motivation. I mean, let's go back to every New Year's when everybody's like, in 3 months, I'm going to lose all this weight, right? And then 2 weeks later, they stop working out. They stop doing everything. So for us, it was, let's just be consistent, right? Or first step, let's take the first step. And we started producing content, right? 20 episodes later, we were like, what if we bring a guest, right? And we brought a guest. The next episode, the second guest that we brought, we were like, what if we give them an epic intro? Like, we didn't think about that in the previous episode. We were literally going one step at a time.
Which is great.
So we did the intro and the guest absolutely loved it. And at the end, we were like, I guess we're going to have to give epic intros to everybody that comes to our show now. And that's how we stayed. And I think it wasn't until a few episodes later, we were like, have you noticed that everybody that we're bringing as a guest is a potential dream client of ours? What if we talk to them after the show, right? And just have this conversation. We have an hour with them talking, building trust. What if we actually, present them to the idea of having a call with us and show them what we do? And that's when that part of the process came out. And now that we have a system to doing all these things, we are like, wow, okay, scaling the business through the podcast, it is possible. We have seen it. So now we can create this bigger plan. But for us, it was very organic, one step at a time. So what I would say, it is good to have a big picture, right? Like, okay, this is maybe the direction I want to go, but let me start on step one and make sure I can do that on a consistent basis, right? Yeah. After I achieve that, okay, what is the next step? And then what is the next step?
Yeah, we have a crazy story with our older brother, right? Like the other Mario, and he lived in a few countries in South America. He lived in Colombia, Ecuador, Peru. He's now back in Bogota, Colombia, right? And he's always had this fire of like his own message, right? But he's always held like these corporate positions. Now he comes to us and is like, "Hey, bros, I want to be part of the company. I'm also a brother, right?" And we're like, "Sweet. Like, do you speak English?" And he's like, no English. Okay, so all Spanish. Okay, sweet. Let's try to sell our services in the Hispanic market. So why don't you like facilitate the connection and we'll sell the service? So that didn't work out because like he wasn't indoctrinated. He didn't like know as much as what we did, or he didn't like publish at the time. So he didn't know the pain points. He didn't know how to identify that dream client. Now, we made him a deal. We're like, okay, Mario, like your tryout is your minimum viable content. Go live for 45 days, right? And he's like, what do I say? I'm like, simple framework, just share a story of what happened that day and then connect them with you, like have a conversation and start finding out those pains. What happened like super fast is in the first 45 days, he now had an audience just from his personal like Facebook lives. He was able to do a presentation and sell a product that was solving the problem of these guys. Well, what that awoke was not only like we thought he was going to be working with us, but that awoke this fire inside of him. So he's like, I want a platform. I want a show. I want to be part of your show. And we're like, you cannot be part of our show because you do not speak English. What don't you understand? And so we're like, okay, you passed the test, the 45 live, you're so motivated, like you're ready, like in this consistency mode. You saw that it could, like it has potential. Let's start your show. So he has a process on how he coaches like salespeople and people in these companies, right? And he branded it the LMT. So now he does a show where he first started bringing his friends, like people that he thought that would add value to an audience, which at the very beginning, there's no audience. Like it's like you and your mother, right? So he's like, why am I not getting clients like in 10 days? I'm like, well, you're targeting the wrong guest if you're trying to monetize, right? Like if you're trying to just give value and and build like that, which is perfectly fine, keep doing it. But if you need to monetize, and he needed to monetize very quickly, he needed at least $1,000 a month very quickly, right? And to a Hispanic audience that money exchanges can be crazy, it was very challenging to monetize that audience. So we're like, hey, what can be a fastest way? Like who's your dream client? Well, people that have access to capital, right? Which can be a company. Perfect. So you coach the salespeople of that company. Who's the decision maker in that company? And he's like, well, the managers, CEOs, presidents, right? Sweet. Can you create content with these people that add value to your audience, but then it will allow you to increase your rapport level and trust level with them. So then you can pitch him on the back end. And he's like, probably. So he started bringing these people that are the podcast is a new form of content. Like they see so much value in it, and they're generous with their time, and now they're going through this amazing conversation. And then on the back end, he goes like, hey, by the way, this is what I do for companies. Can we have a conversation? And the answer is normally yes. Well, guess what happened? 2 weeks ago, this guest came back to him and like, hey, Mario, I loved the way that you conducted that interview. Like, you're running the system through me. We're interested. We have a group of 200 salespeople that we need you to come and coach. And internally, he was like, oh my God, I'm freaking out. Yes, finally, this is it, right? And on the front end, he's like, absolutely. Like, we're happy to do this. Like, let's go ahead, right? And then the person was like, okay, what's your code? Like, I'm very afraid that I'm not going to be able to afford you because, with the show, and no website, no landing page, no LinkedIn, like just a show, right? And the perception was like, I'm not going to be able to afford you, right? He's been publishing for like 30 episodes. It wasn't even like months. It was like 30 episodes. And anyway, so he goes like, hey, you give me your quote. I want this to be a long-term relationship with you, with your company. Come back to me like as soon as you talk to them and we'll make it work, right? So she goes back to the HR department. They discuss the framework, and like I'm on the phone with him. I'm like, okay, what do you say? And he's like, well, I'm really expecting probably like $1,000, which is like a month salary, like really good salary in Colombia, a good salary. You live very well with that, and I'm expecting about that. Well, the quote came back about $2,500 for 3 days of training with 200 people. Well, now because of that, he first solved the issue of the income for about like 3-4 months, right? Second, he's now coaching and impacting 200 lives in that company. Now he has a long-term relationship with that company to do this every quarter, right? And now he has leverage to say, hey, I've coached hundreds of people to achieve these results. Well, guess what? Step 2, phase 2 is just going to be rocket ship, right? So that is the proof of concept. And it's like, this thing works. It's amazing. It's a great platform.
Yeah. How I see it in an analogy is a lot of people try to have the message ready before they start publishing. And what we have found out with people is that you can be in a dark room, right? You don't know exactly what your message is, but the more you speak, right, the more you share your thoughts and put your thoughts into words, it's like a light, right? And it starts shining and it starts, lighting up the room. And now you can see where you need to take the next steps. And you start discovering what is your message, right? What is your consistency looking like? What is your capacity? And then that content, right, that publishing is suddenly lighting up the entire room and you know exactly where to go. But a lot of people feel like they need to have that message perfect and ready before they actually start putting themselves in front of the camera and sharing.
Yeah, Fonzi, what you're saying is also so applicable to the guest. I want to make sure that we're clear on that. Yes, as a host, sure. But even as a guest, that's what I found personally is so perfect as a guest. You get the opportunity to enhance your message, practice your message. You don't get all the questions, if any of the questions in advance. So you don't know what's going to be asked. But the more you're comfortable and tuned in to who you are, why you are, and what your messaging is, now you have 30 to 60 minutes on a show where they're on your side. They're here to help you tell your stories, and you're navigating new and different and familiar terrain to be able to communicate that message. And the more you do that, the better it is for you. Like we said earlier, the confidence, and then the business, of course, and it all ties in because of the podcast space.
I wanted to wind this down as we get to the end of the show and land this bird, so to speak. But I wanted to do that first by sharing another podcasting story that's very, very powerful, and then quickly summarize everything that we sort of chatted about that resonated with me. So our last event at PodMax, and if you haven't heard about it yet, I highly recommend you go to podmax.co. Our next event is December 4th. Josh will be there, I will be there, and so will the Flying Bizz Bros, as I like to call them, because that's the amount of energy they always bring to the table. The keynote speaker, Hal Elrod, who completely crushed. Would you guys agree? I mean, he was off the charts. Yeah. He told us a story about how podcasting as a guest basically created him, basically exploded the Miracle Morning, because he was on a little show called Pat Flynn, whatever his name of his show was at the time. But Pat Flynn had Hal Elrod on the show and championed the whole Savers concept, and that exploded everything. But the thing is, it wasn't just one show. Hal had been on over 100 episodes as a guest before finally getting everything to sort of connect and resonate with the masses that he now inspires and teaches. So I mean, just the idea that you can build a brand and a platform if you have something, it's a product or service, a book, whatever it is, through podcasting and being a guest. And that's why we are always preaching and always talking about how powerful it is. One thing I wanted to mention really quick, and I don't normally read things online or read stuff to people, but there's something so powerful that Gary Vee had said recently, and I had it up here a split second ago. But Gary Vee was talking about how corporate America doesn't necessarily always know what's, they don't have their finger on the pulse of what they invest in, what they know and what they're comfortable with in traditional senses of the word. But so he said something here in an article on Entrepreneur Magazine where he talks about, he goes, another mistake that, brands make is their decision on data, which means they pass over opportunities in new spaces where reliable reporting doesn't exist yet. Sound familiar? Podcasts are the perfect example of that. He says most of the Fortune 500 brands are not spending money on podcasting because there's no reporting. And so they can't justify it on their media spend. Yet, if they were deeply educated on the podcast ecosystem, they would be spending like crazy because they would be stealing customers. And you guys know, and we know how ridiculously powerful podcasting is. And thank you, corporate America, for not paying attention yet, because we own the space, right? This is our world. This is our system. But the thing is, yeah, once they start coming in, we'll make more money. Absolutely. But then it's going to get more crowded. There's going to be more stuff, and there's going to be stuff pushed to the top. But I'm looking forward to that day when they realize what we're doing is powerful, because we're going to be able to help them
on a commercial success, of course.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So wait, really quickly. So I wanted to summarize, be yourself. We were talking about that at the beginning of the show, which is awesome, right? That was something that we realized as business owners is really powerful to just, be yourself. Don't walk into a suit, especially at Luis's wedding. You don't need to wear a suit there. And then there is no exact formula, right? You can create content first. You can have a podcast or a show first. It doesn't matter. Just create content. And creating content, doing the 45 live challenge is a really good sort of way to hold yourself accountable and to formulate and clarify what your message and your story is. Josh and I talk about what we created called the 4 C's: clarifying your message, building a community, and collaborating and finding partners. I only mentioned 3.
Connection.
But anyway, and connecting with you.
There you go.
But yeah, so it's powerful. I love the 45 live. I'm going to start telling people to do that. I'm going to do that myself. I don't think I go 45 days live in a row.
Yeah, funny story with Pablo. Sorry, Eric, with Pablo, he's like, I'm committed 45 days. And then as soon as he finished the 45 day, he called us and he's like, guys, I'm going for 200 days. Like the impact that I've seen. And I think he continued. Like, I don't know where he's at now, but like he saw so much connection. And that's how we connected with Pablo. That's what changed everything. And it was incredible. Yeah.
So good. So good. But that's it in a nutshell, folks. The PodMax. Thanks for being part of the first official PodMax podcast. Yeah. Where's the sound effects, bro? Awesome. Anything left? Any words, Josh? Carrie?
All good words. The purpose of this show is to help you as a business person, as an entrepreneur, darn it, as a human being, to navigate the norms of what we have at our fingertips today through the podcast space. As a host, sure, and also as a guest, and how it works, what is required, and what the benefits are. So thanks for tuning in and joining us. It's the Bizz Bros, Luis and Luis.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
As always, we hope we added some value in your life today, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, folks. Thanks, Bizz Bros.